PCSpecialist's Vidar system is built around a Ryzen 9 5900X. I nearly said 3900X there. 5900X, that's the new 12 core, and an AMD Radeon RX 6800 XT graphics card. Spoiler alert, it performs, it plays games. The price is £2,200, and when I added up the prices at retail of all the components, I came to a figure about £2,250, which is what we like to see. So in essence, PCSpecialist is building a PC, shipping it to you with a warranty, taking away the aggravation of building the thing and configuring it, and saving you 50 quid into the bargain. So provided they've chosen the right parts, this is very good news. The system is built into a Fractal design Meshify C case, which is a case, as I recall, I rather liked when I reviewed it. The processor, as said, is an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X. The motherboard is an Asus Crosshair 8 Hero non-Wi-Fi model. However, PCSpecialist has added in a PCI Express AX200 Wi-Fi 6 card. Memory is 32GB of Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro DDR4 3200, that's C16. You will note 4x8GB rather than 2x16GB. Graphics card is a reference AMD Radeon RX 6800 XT, and naturally that has 16GB of memory because they all do. Primary SSD is a 500GB Samsung 980 Pro. That's an M.2 NVMe, which is PCI Express Gen 4. Bulk storage is 2TB Seagate Ironwolf Pro. Power supply is a Corsair 750W RMX, which is rated at gold. Gold makes us happy. Platinum, titanium are even better, but they cost more. Gold we can live with. The CPU cooler is a PCSpecialist branded FrostFlow 240mm AIO, and they've added 3 case fans, 2 at the front, 1 at the rear. At first glance, the pricing is sensible, the performance is guaranteed, and it looks the part. The name, Vidar. I had to ask about this. It turns out it's a Norse god. Vidar was one of these sons of Odin who killed a wolf called Fenrir, so naturally you name your PC after it. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. However, there's also a tie-in, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The character appears in that as well. I thought, I haven't played Valhalla. The reviews weren't very good, so I gave it a miss. I instead spent my money on Watch Dogs Legion. That's a terrible move. It's an awful game. It's so dull. My advice is to skip Watch Dogs Legion, and why not buy Assassin's Creed Valhalla? It literally can't be worse. So that's where the name Vidar comes from. So I thought for the thumbnail for this video, I'll head to Amazon, I'll look up a Viking costume, and they got like this Viking helmet. But I thought that will do the trick. So I turned to my wife and said, I'm going to buy a Viking helmet. And she said, you've lost your mind. I said, what are you talking about? She said, why would you do that? I said, but it's a Norse Viking tie-in with the name Vidar. It makes perfect sense. Look, here you go. She said, you've watched the news, have you? I said, of course I've watched the news. She said, that bloke. I said, I see your point entirely. No, I shan't be buying a Viking helmet. And that's why the thumbnail is just a PC and Leo and nothing tricksy. Sorry about that. So, before I get on with the review, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, do it now please, and also ring the bell. Let's take a look at the BIOS. So we can see the processor, DOCP standard, which basically is the equivalent of XMP in Asus terms. Memory running at 3200. Everything on auto. Shouldn't think we're going to find anything in here that's been changed. Nope. If we go into monitor, where we'll see temperatures and fan speeds, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fans listed, and also the AIO pump. So 5 fans plus the pump. And within QFan, the connection, which is where you can change it from auto to voltage or PWM, is set on auto, and the profile is standard. Same all the way down. So they have enabled DOCP, and that's it. As is the way with systems from the smaller system builders, you get a box that contains things like the cables from the power supply that aren't used in the build, the mains power cord, various bits of paperwork, user guides from the SSD, power supply, motherboard and the case. In other words, these are retail parts that have been assembled into a PC rather than some obscure version, say, of the Fractal Meshify C that you've never heard of before. The parts are familiar. The build is neat and tidy. It's also really compact. Let's pull out the front panel. And you can see the interior is essentially dominated by the graphics card. We've got a 240mm AIO in the roof, a pair of fans in the front, one at the rear, two on the AIO, just as you'd expect. Around the back, cable management's actually neat and tidy, no argument there whatsoever. The bulk storage drive is in one of the two drive caddies. And here we have poking through a spare SATA cable in case you want to populate the second drive caddy, or indeed to mount a SATA SSD on that drive plate there. In the roof of the case there is almost no clearance whatsoever between the memory and the cooler, but there is clearance, a few mil, which is all you require. The upshot is everything is in the right place, working inside the case if you decided for whatever reason to, I don't know, install some modded cables or some such. You're going to have to dismantle parts in order to get to what you want to get to, but the build is neat and tidy. As I showed you in the BIOS, all the fans are controlled directly by the motherboard. And yet, in the package of accessories, you get this little RF remote control that controls, by the look of it, RGB and fan speed. So I prodded buttons and absolutely nothing happened whatsoever. And after a while I realised the receiver for the RF remote control is also in the box for accessories. This does absolutely nothing because it's all handled by the motherboard. So let's take a look at how you manage the RGB. When it comes to RGB setup, we've got something of a mess at the moment because we've essentially got two separate systems, and in addition we've got the graphics card which is static. The Corsair Vengeance memory is set to a rotating pattern. The AIO and the front and rear fans are set to static red. Let's just change the static red to static blue. And you can see that. So the AIO, the pump, the fans in the roof, the front and the rear have just changed. Graphics cards stayed untouched, and it will do. And the memory is doing rotating random colors. Let's change the memory to there we have it. Quite pretty, slightly annoying. Let's change that to static red. If we go back to Asus Armoury Crate, which is controlling the motherboard and the RGB headers, and choose red there, it now looks like a unified whole. Bit boring though. Let's go with rainbow. And there we have it. RGB to the max. Not sure I could live with it, but it's quite nice to see it working. Well, I'm wrong, aren't I? I've actually got a third set of RGB, my Razer mouse and keyboard, which are controlled by Synapse. Let us go for rainbow on here just for the moment. It's actually a bit understated by Razer. What other choices do we have? Nope, Spectrum Cycling. Looks about as good as it gets. So now we have the RGB on rainbowish. Performance. I cannot criticise the PCSpecialist Vidar on the performance front in any meaningful sense. 12 cores, 24 threads running at 4.4 GHz sustained. Graphics card is a brand new design and the core runs at 2.3 GHz. This PC delivers the goods. So in a pure CPU test such as Blender, it's got all the grunt you could want. If for some reason you want grunt, epic, unimaginable grunt, of course you maybe go for a Threadripper with up to 64 cores. But in PC terms, 12 cores, 24 threads is just immense. And the combination of a compact PC with this much processor and graphics is almost outrageous. The graphics card is clearly capable of 4K gaming. If for some reason you choose to step down from 4K, say to 1440, well, okay, there is no point stepping down to 1080p because it doesn't give you any extra frames. This PC in gaming is occasionally constrained by the CPU. However, it delivers without a shadow of a doubt. So 1440p is your starting point. 4K is very likely your destination. The SSD, the Samsung 980 Pro, it's a brand new Gen 4 SSD. That also delivers. We've got reasonably fast 3200 MHz memory. However, Zen 3 performs better on compatible 3600 MHz memory. Of that there is no doubt. My preference would be to upgrade the RAM from 32 to 3600 MHz. But in general, overall terms, the performance of this PC is stellar. And as we reach the conclusion of this review, you know what I want. I want to find the Achilles heel of the PCSpecialist Vidar, something that it does poorly, or some horrible trait that I can report that's going to give some balance to this review. And I can't find it. Temperatures in this instance are frankly very reasonable. Both CPU and GPU, you're talking low to mid 70s, and the VRM temperatures, according to HW Info, 30 to 32 degrees under load, under sustained load, under blender load, which is just what the heck. Now, I'm happy to believe that HW Info is misreporting the VRM temps, but the heat sinks themselves are chill. Everything I can thermally probe on this motherboard is cool. So I'm going to say those temperatures, remarkable as they are correct, and I almost cannot believe what I'm saying. So what do we have in the way of negative points? Well, the Samsung 980 Pro SSD is a mere 500 gigabytes in size. It's backed up by a 2 terabyte Seagate hard drive for sure, so you've got a reasonable amount of total storage, but 500 gigs of SSD, it's not a lot. On the other hand, going up to a terabyte is going to cost you. Perhaps a secondary SSD, something like that. Perhaps switch out the hard drive for another SSD. It's not ideal, but I can see why PCSpecialist has done what they've done. The memory I've already mentioned. I prefer to see 3600 MHz rather than 3200 MHz. It's not a deal breaker, but it would help the system. The case fans under load, this system can get a bit rackety, but it's compact and it's full of cooling, so where's the shock there? Better it's slightly noisy than not cool enough, that's for sure. One thing I can certainly point to, the Fractal Defiant C does not have a Type-C USB on the front, which is ironic given it's called the Defiant C. Let's face it, Fractal's been overhauling their case designs and they've done some really good work. This case is rather elderly. Might it be due for an update soon? Who knows? As a closing word, the price. £2,200 is certainly good value for money, and the thing is, right now, as we all know, prices are going up because supply is very tight. I would not be shocked if this PC went from £2,200 to £2,500. I really wouldn't. However, PCSpecialist confirmed as I started this review, the price is indeed still £2,200. And if that's the case, and God love them for doing it, I strongly recommend, if you're in the market for a high-end gaming PC, you rush out and buy the PCSpecialist Vidar.